So we're off to the river. Wow, that's a good river. We river a straight flush on the king of clubs.
Hey YouTube.
Good day everyone, my name's Lee Betts and I'm a professional poker player from Melbourne, Australia. At the moment it's about 8 PM on a Friday evening, and like all of the cool kids, I'm indoors playing poker instead of outside at a club or a bar or something, and I've just wrapped up my poker session for the day of playing 200 NL 6 max games, and I thought we'd just go over the session pretty briefly, see how I ran in terms of results and gameplay grade, and then sort of get into some deeper analysis on just one specific hand that I found very, very interesting in the session. If you like this new format, or even if you don't like it, hop in the comments and let me know what you think of it, because I'll probably be able to put this type of format out more regularly than I have with the longer form vlogs I typically do. So curious to get some feedback, hop in the comments, let me know. But with any further ado, let's get into today's session. So here we are with today's session. As you can see by the graph, it has been a bit of a roller coaster up and down all day, but we did end up with a profit of 367. So definitely ran pretty well during the session in terms of my results. We only did play 1,145 hands, which, I mean, I'm happy that that's like a number over 1,000. I didn't totally slack all day, but I really do think that I should be trying to play more hands than that. I do have the time to play 1,500 hands per day is usually what I aim for, and falling a bit shy of that is pretty disappointing. That's how I actually ran during the session. But in terms of how I feel about my gameplay grade, we're going to go with a B+. For the most part, I do feel like I was dialed in, focused, making good decisions, barring one particular hand that we're about to get into in a minute. But overall, I think I was focused, making good exploits on my opponent's strategies, so pretty happy overall. But the main things I'm going to down myself for are just not putting in a whole ton of volume. I really do think I could have had an A-grade performance if I did put in the 1,500 hands today, so I have to go down for that a bit, and also going down a bit for the mistake I made in the following hand that we're about to get into. Let's go. Alright, let's kick this thing off. So the action's on me in middle position with Queen Jack of clubs. Go ahead and raise it up to 5, and then I get a defend from a tight aggressive big blind. So we go heads up to a flop. And this is a beautiful flop if I ever saw one. 10-9-3, all clubs. We flop the third nut flush and are absolutely loving life at the moment. When the opponent checks it over to me, definitely want to go ahead and bet my flush for value here. We have to decide what size we want to use, and I think a strategy I usually use on monotone flops as a pre-flop aggressor is I like to bet a lot on them, just because there's a bunch of hands in my opponent's range that don't have a club that are really going to be put in an awkward spot if I bet. Like, even if they have ace-10 of spades, it's pretty awkward for them to keep calling off across multiple barrels, and it's just a good way to put pressure on their range by having a robust range. Additionally, a lot of the hands in our range are going to want to play it a bit more cautious on this board. Like I said, it's a tough spot for them if they have ace-10 of spades. Tough spot for us with the exact same hand, so have to keep that in mind as we play this hand. Keeping my whole range in mind, I decide to go ahead and bet this one for 4, so just a bit over the third of the pot, and then the villain throws in the call. So we're off to the turn, which is the 7 of hearts. The villain checks over to us again, and now I think we can start to size up a bit. It does make a lot of sense for us to have hands in our range that are playing it cautious, because not only do we have to be concerned when we're behind if we want to keep value betting like an overpair, so it's a good way to balance it out is to have some really strong hands in that betting range. So I decide to go 14. I haven't mentioned this yet, but I did actually run a sim on this hand. I'm a bit curious to see what sizing it likes betting with all the hands in my range on this turn. Regardless, back onto the hand, the opponent does throw in the call. So we're off to the river. Wow, that's a good river. We river a straight flush on the king of clubs, and this is a really good river actually, because I do think it's very possible that my opponent is calling down with a lot of hands like, ace of clubs, 10 of hearts, for example, or they could even have ace of clubs, jack of diamonds, they were just playing check call with their nut flush draw. That does make a lot of sense. This is a really, really good river because we have the literal nuts, and it's actually pretty likely our opponent has the second nuts themselves. So when they check it over to me, I decide in my head that I want to use a polarized betting strategy just to try and get maximum value when my opponent does have the ace of clubs. The opponent's tight aggressive, so this isn't necessarily true of every tight aggressive opponent, but I really do think most of them in this play pool on average, I'm probably going to know not to go ahead and check raise this board with a second nuts for value, just because it's going to be so hard for me to call if I have like pocket queens with the queen of clubs, you know, maybe, but I think I'm better off just trying to build this pot by having a really large betting size. This is where I get really stumped in the hand. I'm just not sure like what size that should be. Like, how do I get the most value from the ace of clubs? And in game, I decided to rip it all in, and I think this is a pretty big mistake, just because if there's any way I can induce my opponent's hero fold the ace of clubs here, this is the way to do it. I think a lot of opponents are capable enough to realize that I'm betting this large because I have a straight flush and they can get away from the ace of clubs. So I don't know if this bet's ever getting called. If I was to take this line with like pocket jacks with the jack of clubs, it might actually be a good bluff to get them off the ace of clubs when I do actually have the nuts. I shouldn't go quite this big. It might be a good spot to like bet the size of the pot, maybe bet something like 60. Really make it like more believable. I could be bluffing. Putting this much into a pot this size, it really just does scream. I have a straight flush. Not too surprisingly, the villain does end up folding. Pretty disappointed. Really the biggest mistake I think I made during the hand was using such a large bet size on the river. But like I said earlier, I did run a sim on this hand to see what all the correct betting sizes are from an equilibrium standpoint. So we're going to show the sim to you guys. Let's go. Okay, so we got the sim run here. Already clicked the run solve, so we're going to see live my reaction to what I should be doing, how my opponent should be playing on this board texture, middle position versus big blind. So let's get to it. Action starts on the big blind. I just locked it, so they always check, because realistically I think they'll always check this board, so that's what they go ahead and do. The sim does like betting. Pretty much most mate flushes for the 63.6 sizing, which does make a lot of sense to me. It does have them checking some at like a very small frequency, but most of the time going ahead and betting those, using a lot of like ace of clubs, queen of clubs, king of clubs hands as semi-bluffs. And then the opponent, it does have some raises, but most of the time they're calling when they don't have a flush. I did have the big blind check a second time. I really don't think the board texture changes much on the 7 of hearts, so yeah, I just node locked it to do that, because the sims take forever if you give them like a bunch of different options on each street, and realistically in game I think anyone's leading the 7 of hearts turn. So I had the thing check over to me. I had a struggle what size I should be betting on this turn. Should I have overbets with, you know, a polarized range? And Sim seems to think that that is not the case. They've actually got 0% with the overbet here, and most of the time they are betting. It is around the 14, so I put that size in, and the sim seems to much prefer it to an overbet. And with my specific hand, Queen Jack of Clubs, it's always going ahead and betting that much. The opponent not really raising much either. You can see on monotone boards, monotone flops at least, there isn't a bunch of raising going on, and I think the sim just likes playing it more cautious on those boards, just because I think I have a bunch of ace-x of clubs hands in my range that I raise with pre-flop, and the big blind's going to be defending with a lot of those, and I just think, you know, the sim doesn't want to really be inflating the pot too much when my opponent can potentially have the nuts in their range. They are raising. The villain is raising with a few of their nut flushes that unblock like some of my flushes. So, you know, it's raising with ace-4 of clubs, because that unblocks me having Queen Jack of Clubs. But when the opponent has ace-queen of clubs themselves, they're always flatting with that one, because it's going to be much harder for me to have a worse hand. Regardless though, they do go ahead and throw in the call, like they should be, with 50% of their range, according to the sim. Now, let's see what happens on this magical river where we make the straight flush. Didn't actually node lock the villain to go ahead and check this one. I gave them the option to lead out. I thought maybe some of their range would like leading out, but the sim doesn't think so. So 100% check does make sense for them. I think sometimes maybe I'll see villains lead out in this spot if they did river the ace of clubs, but the sim does not agree with that. Now it's on me, and I gave myself a bunch of different bet sizes, and as I probably already predicted, the overbet all in 3 times pot, not a good play. Not a good play. Shouldn't be doing it at equilibrium ever. I did give it a smaller overbet option, betting 58 into 46, and it does like that size a lot more, including it does like using that size more often, particularly with a lot of hands that are the nut flush. But if we go here to my specific combination, likes betting this hand, but likes using a smaller size, only about 75% of the pot. Yeah, so with a straight flush, it does actually like betting a bit smaller. Not really sure what the utility of this is. I mean, maybe it is to induce raises from the ace of clubs. Yeah, it seems kind of counterproductive in my opinion. Maybe the sim, I'm going to go ahead and bet that amount actually and see if the sim does have raises. Okay, here we go. Here's where it's interesting. When the action's back on the big blind, they actually are meant to raise with like some of the nut flushes. I don't know, that seems pretty crazy to me. I wouldn't be doing that if I had the ace of clubs in their spot. I guess that's why it likes betting smaller with queen jack of clubs, is because they think it will induce raises from the villain. But I think if we're going to deviate from the equilibrium play, that might be a good spot for it. And if we just use the queen jack of clubs in like a overbet sizing, or maybe even just a pot size bet sizing, that makes a lot more sense to me than betting down to induce raises from the second nuts. The sim disagrees with me, and this thing has a much greater capacity for maths than my brain does, so maybe this thing knows better than I do. So there you have it. The sim was pretty interesting. I'm surprised that it does down bet a little bit with the straight flush. I just couldn't see the villain ever raising nut flush there. You know, it just seems like a bit of an overplay in my opinion, but the sim doesn't think so. What do you guys think? If you guys were the big blind on the river, would you ever raise with the nut flush that doesn't block the straight flush? I wouldn't, but let me know what you think in the comments below. Also, please feel free to rip into me for my massive overbet shove. I will admit straight up that is a bit of like tilt, like, oh my god, I hit a straight flush. Oh, they'll call, you know, anything with the ace of clubs, but realistically, I don't think that is the case. That's going to wrap it up for today. Thank you so much for watching this vlog. Like I said earlier, drop in the comments, let me know what you think of this new format, as well as my play on the individual hand, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I've been going to home games a bit more recently, so we'll still be looking to get more live poker vlogs out as I go to play more often. But like I said earlier, it's hard for me to predict, you know, when I'll actually be invited to a game and they'll actually let me film at the game, because sometimes I can get invited, they won't let me film. Definitely can always put out more online poker content because I play online poker every day. For now, I'm out of here. Peace.